what was it that struck you about how trafficking was not or is not something that's talked about more? It's almost brushed under the rug, as it were.
And I often think, like, when you think about trafficking, right, you think about something that's so horrendous. Probably the best descriptive word you could say for it is it's dark, right? And it was weighty, it was heavy. And you could see it in the eyes of the women that were being treated as if they were a product. You could see it in their faces, and that they, if given the choice, would rather not be there. And what people often think is that light and darkness are opposing forces, but they're not. Because darkness has no force or power. Darkness is simply the absence of light, right? It exists when light is not present. And so part of my role is to make people aware of the darkness and then bring that light into the darkness, into those places where individuals are told they have no worth and value. There's a verse that says the light shines in the darkness and the darkness does not overcome it.
Dan.
Chris.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's good to be here.
How did you get started helping defend those who can't defend themselves?
Yeah, it's a story. So if we got time for story. I often share my story actually doesn't start with me. It starts with those that have set an example before me. So for me, my grandparents were the first ones. They came to America. My grandfather from Germany. He was a PhD in engineering. My grandmother came from Italy, was a concert violinist, came to America, accomplished people, and could have, grabbed that American dream and ran with it. But instead, they decided that they were going to go to Central America, and with his background in engineering, build from the ground up radio stations, literally the scaffolding to the towers, to building the buildings themselves, to building the radios. And they did that so they could broadcast the gospel all across Central America. And while they're having 6 kids, raising 6 kids on the field, and they, those radio stations, some still exist today, 85 years later. And one of those kids was my mother, and my mother married my father, and so she saw that example. And yet, when I grew up, I had this, this idyllic childhood. I had what every kid would want. I won the lottery when it came to childhood. I was the youngest of 4. I'm still the youngest of 4. And we grew up just outside of Philadelphia in a town called Telford, and we had 18 acres of land. We had dirt bikes. We had an in-ground swimming pool. We had ponds to go fishing in. We had zip lines. We had all this fun stuff, right? So as a kid, this was awesome. But I still remember one day, my parents came in and kind of collected us to the living room and said, "Hey, we want to have a family meeting." And at the time, I think I was 11, and they said, "Hey guys, all this stuff's fun, but it's not what's really important." And so they kind of just sprung it on us. They said, we want to go and serve elsewhere and do something that is eternal and serve people. And then they said, "Have you ever heard of this country called Ukraine?" And I said, "No." And they said, "We're actually going to go there as missionaries." And so I saw my parents sell everything they had, this beautiful property, and we all moved to Ukraine. Me being the youngest at 12 was when I moved. And I saw them do that. And when they first told me this, that we were going to Ukraine in that family meeting, all I'd ever known was the white sandy beaches of Cancun, because that's where we went every year. So in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, I'm on board. I'm going to go to white sandy beaches of Ukraine, only to be surprised and grow up on a dirt street with a meat processing factory at the end of the street, which always wafted some nice aroma on those hot summer days. But to answer the question of how I got started, it starts with those examples, because those were bold people that made bold choices. And sometimes when we're called to step in faith, it means stepping where you don't really know and you don't actually have a stepping stone to land on. And so for me, when I learned about human trafficking, it wasn't something I was seeking out. I was thinking this is an issue that was under the radar for me. Didn't realize what was happening, but I heard about it in church one Sunday, and it was one of those things that gripped me so much I decided I needed to do something. And so that was the starting point, is the examples I had before me, and then first learning about it, which prompted me to go down a whole nother journey of my own.
When you talk about serving for eternity, what does that mean?
I think you said it. I mean, it's serving with this mindset that what we do here has an eternal impact. So this mindset of the things that we see, taste, touch, and feel, they're real, but they're only temporary. And so this kind of goes into my personal mission statement. You know, I'd love to challenge people on that. What is your personal mission statement? And the majority don't have one, and I encourage them get one because it guides you. And so for me, my personal mission statement, which is we only have a short time to live, so with the little time I have, positively impact as many people as possible and show them their true worth. And that true worth is an eternal true worth, meaning that their value isn't on the external, it's on the internal because it's tied to the eternal. And so when we serve others, helping them recognize that, and that's part of my core, of who I am, and I get to live that out in my daily work now.
In the faith service overlap sphere, do you think there might be an overemphasis on heaven in terms of, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to live this life in a way so that when I get to heaven, X, Y, Z, as opposed to, hey, the eternal is also here on earth, and it's how you're how you're serving people, how you're bringing peace to people, how you're helping people find their true value. That's eternal value also. What do you think?
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people miss this opportunity. Kind of as you put it, the eternal starts here. I think a lot of people, if we're talking about perspectives of faith and Christianity, right, in particular, we're going to narrow in on that. And that idea of heaven or hell, one or the other, and this idea that I'm going to get my bus ticket. Now I got my bus ticket. I'm good to go. I know when I die, I'm going to end up in heaven. And then that's where it ends. That's unfortunately not how it works. That's not the totality of the story of why we're here. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to demonstrate our true faith, to demonstrate that we believe, to demonstrate what it means to serve others. And so if we just grab our bus ticket and end the story there, well, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, because our story could be far greater if we said, hey, I'm going to take what I know as truth and what I know as truly healing, this eternal perspective and mindset that we are eternal beings and have much more value than maybe at first blush, and share that with others. They then can realize their true worth. So it goes back to that mission, that personal mission.
What was it as a young person experiencing that kind of discomfort of growing up in a second world country, post-Soviet era, and having the dirt road, and not kind of resenting that and being like, oh, this is really uncomfortable after, the sandy beaches and the big land in Pennsylvania. What was it that you said, this is inspiring and I want to live this example?
That's assuming a lot to think I didn't have issue with it, because I did, because it was such a drastic change. And in time, it changed. My perspective changed. And it's one of those things I tell people, as hard as it was, I never look back with regret on it. And at the time we got there, it was actually considered a third world kind of developing country. It was so just impoverished. And so, for example, one of the things we helped with was not only working on developing churches and systems to help people through faith, but also through humanitarian aid. So my mother, being a nurse, she collected supplies because there it was common, that they would reuse needles because they didn't have that resource. So she retold one story when she went to the hospital, and they pulled out a leather binder and kind of flipped it open, and in there were all these used needles, and they proceeded to take one out to reuse. And so growing up with that, when I was there, at first it was not well, this is easy. You know, I had to start from scratch with learning new language to make new friends. And so for a while, it was not so bad because I had siblings there, but then they all left to go back to school and finish up and then go to college. And it was at that point when I was by myself, then I started to resent everything because I was an only child now, and in this country that didn't have the comforts and luxuries that I was accustomed to. But then I think, I don't know, a switch flipped, and I started to recognize that what really was important to me was the people, and the people of that country, of Ukraine, are just loving, beautiful people with a great history in art and music, and the friendships I was developing. And so I recognize, near the end of my stay, I was there for 6 years, from 12 years old to 18 years old. But around like age 16, 17, 18, I really understood the value of people and friendship. And all those luxuries, that I would say I'd experienced before really weren't important anymore. And so I look back and I say, this, for me, that was the greatest learning experience, was to recognize what is truly valuable to us as individuals, right? It's not the things, right? It's the people. And that gave me no choice but to recognize that, because the things were all removed and all I was left with was people. And that taught me to learn how to value them and see the value in them.
As you transition from missionary work in Ukraine to what you're doing now, what was it that struck you about how trafficking was not or is not something that's talked about more? It's almost brushed under the rug, as it were.
Yeah, for me, even when I first learned about it, it wasn't on my radar. It was one of those things where I heard about it and I was kind of just shocked. I was floored that this existed, that modern day slavery was happening. And I tell people, it's not. I wouldn't fault you if you don't know, because not all of us are walking in that world of darkness. The unfortunate thing is, now that I'm here and talking to you, you do know. And then from there, we have to decide, what do we do, right? And so for a lot of what my role is, is to provide services and care to individuals, to let them know that they have value, but also let those in the community learn about this. And I don't think those in the community that I'm talking to aren't shying away from it. It's just that it's not talked about because it's in a world of darkness, right? And so part of my role is to kind of blend those two worlds, because this needs to be known, this issue of human trafficking. And I often think, like, when you think about trafficking, right, you think about something that's so horrendous. Probably the best descriptive word you could say for it is it's dark, right? And I had quit my job. I had a career job working for an engineering firm, 2 young kids. My son was 5, my daughter was 2. And my wife was able to, we could afford to have her stay home and raise our 2 kids. But this issue needed to be addressed, so I quit my job and started WorthWhile. And I first went to India, and in my first few weeks of starting this new work, I went with some others to help some individuals, some women in the brothel areas that were forced there, that were being sold. And when I talk about trafficking, that word dark, it was first really recognized, I think, by me in that moment, because we went into that setting, and although I could see with my eyes, you could feel the dark presence. And it was weighty, it was heavy. And you could see it in the eyes of the women that were being treated as if they were a product. You could see it in their faces, and that they, if given the choice, would rather not be there. And what my role today is to also help people understand, like I said, bringing those things together, the light and the dark, because many people are in the light, and that's good, but they also have to recognize what's in the dark. And there's a verse that says the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. And what people often think is that light and darkness are opposing forces, but they're not. because darkness has no force or power. Darkness is simply the absence of light, right? It exists when light is not present. And so part of my role is to make people aware of the darkness and then bring that light into the darkness, into those places where individuals are told they have no worth and value. And so that's kind of the place I find myself often in working with individuals today is helping those in the community learn about it who maybe are not aware, and helping those that are in the darkness to be shown the light and come out into it.
I think in Genesis, in the creation story, the Bible puts emphasis on there being a separation between light and dark. It's that God created, he organized a separation between light and dark. That there's kind of like, it's not necessarily, it overcame the darkness. There's a separation now, just like there's a separation between land and water. There's an organizing there. It strikes me. What's your reaction to folks who may want to do the right thing? They have a faith-based background. They want to serve or help. They want to live a good life. But they feel a little triggered by the situation. Maybe they feel like it's so unpleasant, it's so dark that they can't quite handle it. They say, oh, no, I can't talk about that.
And I think you'd expect me to say that they just need to man up, right? They need to pull up their britches and get to work. And I think that is true for some, but I also feel that we're not all called to the same thing, and for different reasons. And I think everybody can play a part, though, right? And so one of the things I love about what WorthWhile does is we call to the community and say, you can be part of this solution, right? You may not all be equally able or ready or willing even, but just like we kind of started, like the sad reality is now that I'm talking to you about this issue, you now have a choice, right? Your choice is either to do nothing, pretend what I just said never happened, or take some ownership in it. And so there are individuals that are not, equipped for various reasons. It can be their own trauma, their own past. It can be their health. It can be a variety of things. And so I would never fault someone if they can't engage maybe at the same way and level I did. This isn't a competition, but what it is imperative is that we get involved in some capacity. Remember that bus ticket that we might get on our path to heaven, is left, small and, not taking up much space in our pocket if we don't do anything with the knowledge that we have that there is a heaven and that there is an eternal value to us. And so my encouragement to the community when we get involved is like, you can join with us. And so we find a lot of different ways to get people involved. And so a lot of times my approach starts with first introducing this issue, showing them the darkness, helping them understand the light and how it makes impact in that darkness, and then inviting them to be part of this process. And we get a variety of people from different skill sets. And I love, we have, I think over 3,000 volunteers on our roster. We have several hundred, active every year working and involved. We have different able-bodied people. We have different capacities of ability. We have different levels of socioeconomic statuses. People with multiple homes, people with no homes, people fighting homelessness, people with mental health needs, and others that are scholars, right? But the calling is the same to all of us, right? To instill value in others and help them understand their worth. And so that's what we get to do as part of what we do at WorthWhile.
I've detected in your family a mission to connect. Your dad built radio towers to spread the word, to connect with communication, to go halfway across the world to Eastern Europe. I could assume that part of your mission is to communicate things, to let people know about things. In regard to an unfortunate, very sad event that happened yesterday, I'm curious, for those of us who have the bus ticket and say, I'm not just going to take it and run, but I'm going to go try to get some other people to get the bus tickets also. Have you detected any suppression of that speaking out and vocalizing things that are happening? Have you detected any like resistance to communicating? I'll let you interpret that question as you will.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and what you're referencing is the assassination of Charlie Kirk yesterday, and that is a sad reality that there is, again, that light and darkness, and there is a battle in that regard. And, yeah, for what I've seen, and this is something that is often I have to share with pastors in particular, because they'll point out, we want to have you come and speak at our church, but we see on your website you're not mentioning faith and your approach to how you share the gospel with individuals. And so why is that? And I said, that's a great question. And they asked them, have you ever read The Art of War by Sun Tzu? It's this old book, and they usually will say no. But if you have, one of the key things in there, in this art of war, is being clandestine, being secretive, to be able to seek a path behind the enemy, right? And so what I found, you're talking about this ability to talk and to talk freely, is fairly early on when I would share with secular agencies what we were doing, how we were providing long-term care and housing for survivors of trafficking, how we're offering programming out in the community, connecting with survivors where they are, helping them understand their worth, what trauma is, how to heal from trauma, connect them to resources, connect them to churches, right? We started to have those conversations, and these agencies that are also working in the same field we are would kind of stop the conversation there once faith was mentioned and say, hey, thanks, but no thanks, we're not going to work with you. And that happened several times to the point where I recognize, oh, we're in the enemy's territory, right? So I can't fly my flag high. I need to tuck it away. I need to sneak in. I need to get to where I need to be, which is war, right? And so this is something that oftentimes is missed, I think, by the Christian faith is, we walk in light, we shine the light, but the reality is like, well, there is a war still being waged. Kind of, you made the point, the eternity starts here, right, where we're at. So that eternal war has already started. It's already begun. So we either choose to engage or pretend it's not there. And so if we choose to engage, sometimes you have to be a bit clandestine to get in, and you have to watch what you say, because if said at the wrong time, you lose your opportunity. And what we've seen is the growth of our programs. So we run this one program called Worth It, and it's called Worth It because the idea is we want individuals to know their worth, right? And you are worth it. But what it really does is it focuses on trauma and how to heal from sexual violence that's happened time and time again. And that's what trafficking often entails. There's labor trafficking and sex trafficking, but predominantly sex trafficking is what we see. And this program, initially we started with kind of being very open about the faith elements to it, only to be, kind of shunned by other agencies. And then when we said, okay, let's adopt this model of like, we're going to provide all these other very valuable resources, let's highlight that when talking to these other agencies. The doors have been flung open. We work in agencies and programs in prisons, and so we're invited to not just come back. They say, can you do even more? Can you do even more? So last year, we started this organization back in 2012 with the focus of serving women 18 and over who've had a history of trafficking. And so last year, though, in the prison system, they said, what about the general population? What about, everybody? This Worth It program is making such impact with the women here. Now, everybody means everybody. That means men. And so we're like, well, okay, let's consider that. So we actually were able to kind of revamp and retool our Worth It curriculum that was developed for women initially and start to offer that to men. And that all happened because first and foremost, we had to get in there, right? And we had to find a way to get behind enemy lines, right? And so that's part of what we see in the freedom of speech has I'd like to think it still exists, but when it comes to certain topics of faith, there's a true war that's being waged that we need to navigate carefully.
do you see a distinction between a warrior against injustice who's Christian and a Christian who is a warrior against injustice?
Maybe you could explain a little how you see that.
I could. There's a chance I might be possibly leading in my question. I think sometimes I've interacted with, so I do a lot of homeless shelter, homeless food bank stuff, and sometimes there's like, hey, here's a meal, and have you heard of the Lord of the word of the Lord of the Jesus? Like it's the goal is to evangelize. That's like, here's the food and here's the bill. You have to listen to God. Versus, man, I love God so much. Okay, I'm gonna go serve some food. Here's some food. Bye. And the conversation ends there.
Yeah, I got you now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So don't worry, it's not leading. That's actually one of the things I'd love to talk about. And this goes to that, that idea of, how I often have to approach Christians and churches and stuff, because a lot of times it's very much that mindset of like, I'll do good and then tell you why I'm doing good, as opposed to I'm doing good because of what God did for me, right? And so I often love to share with individuals, like they'll sit there and I'll talk to a group of women or a group of men, and they're like, why apologize, but why the hell are you doing this? That's what they would say to me. And I'd be like, well, let me explain, right? Because I've already done the work, right? And I didn't have to tell them why. The curiosity is sparked. There has to be a reason. What is your get out of this? And I love to share with them. I said, I get nothing out of this other than get to possibly continue this relationship beyond here. What do you mean by beyond here? Well, there's something more to all this, right? This is my bedrock, my foundation that I'm starting from, is that you and I have an equal value. Whether I'm, able to drive a car here and go back home to my home and have, name brand clothes, and you might be sitting in a prison cell, guess what? Our value's the same. Why is that? Well, the reason why is because of this Hebrew, Jesus, and what he did for us. And so, the starting point isn't so much my desire to proselytize, but the reality is when people are truly engaged in you serving them, there's curiosity that starts. And the reality is true change happens in relationship, right? So I'm not going to discount and say you shouldn't go and share the gospel with individuals. I will say, though, you have a far better chance of helping someone that's dealing with complex trauma and significant pain to heal if you first start with relationship. If you're first willing to like, hey, let's get to know each other. Like, let's build this relationship. But that also requires time, right? And time is something we don't always have. So it's a commitment, right? And making time and making that availability and being vulnerable and not feeling you need to hide yourself fully. And I think, there's some sects of Christianity that you have to come polished to church, right? And I share with those that I'm serving. I said, listen, I heard this great pastor say it. He retold the story. He said he had a young man come to him and said, I want to come to church, but I can't. And the pastor said, why? He said, because I'm a drug user. And he goes, well, no, you still can come. He's like, no, but I can't come to church as a drug user. He's absolutely can. And the kid was like struggling to understand. He's like, let me ask you this. He's like, how much do you wash yourself in the sink before you get in the shower? He goes, why would I do that? He goes, the shower is what cleans me. And he goes, that's what Christ does, right? You come to Christ dirty, right? You don't wash yourself in the sink fully. You come hurt. You come broken. And that's what Christ is there for, right? That shower is there to wash away that dirt. That Christ is there to take that away from us. And so when we go to others and that are hurting, it's like, hey, you're perfect the way you are. You're absolutely in the right spot where you need to be. because you should be coming into the shower dirty. You should be coming to Christ dirty. And that's where the cleaning happens, that vulnerability to accept that we're not perfect, right? That we're flawed, that we're broken. But that's what gives us access to Christ. That's what allows him to do what he's meant to do.
It reminds me of the movie Inception, if you've seen. But the whole point of it is you can't give anyone an idea if they think you gave it to them. You have to let them come to the conclusion themselves, and that's the most powerful way. So it's like if you try to evangelize and say, "Listen, I think you need Christ, and I'm going to be praying for you that you find it." Like human nature is going to instantly push against that, even if you're completely right in every regard. If you tell someone something, they're going to want to push against it every single time. But if you just sit there and there's a completely non-judgmental energy, non-anxious energy, you're just with them. There's no agenda, and you say, "I'm here to love you," and this is my. I feel an overwhelming peace in my heart. And they're like, "How do you have that? I want that. I want that." Now they sing their Disney "I Want" song. It's like, I want peace in my heart. And then now they're asking, it's like, how did you get that peace in your heart?
Yeah.
That's your opportunity to share. When addressing the kinds of things that WorthWhile is addressing, how important is innovation in terms of the technology that's constantly evolving to kind of spread this darkness and the access of this darkness and coordination of this darkness? How important is innovation?
Yeah. I feel like you must have read my core values.
I did.
Yeah. So one of the things so there's two sets of core values. One is for the organization, which I developed back in 2019. And then one is my personal set. And they're very close in a lot of things, and then they deviate a little bit. But innovation is kind of shared in both, because I think it's one of those kind of pressing things. If you're able and capable of thinking of solutions, then you should, because there's issues that are complex and comprehensive that require a complex and comprehensive response. So when we talk about trafficking and the factors that play into it and the people that are involved in it, there's a lot of facets and elements that are happening. From the exploiters to coming up with creative ways to exploit, to the individuals that are dealing with a variety of traumas to where they don't even see themselves as a victim. They say, "I'm the reason I'm where I'm at," when the reality is they've had someone who's manipulated them, exploited them, and then even forced them. But trauma plays a weird trick on us sometimes, and it's a ugly bedfellow, this self-blame that comes with trauma. And so we need to help people understand that in order to effectively reach everyone, we need to find solutions that reach in all those different places. So innovating allows us to do that, because we'll look at a situation and say, "Hey, here's a gap. Let me fill that with a new solution." Innovating also has to be paired with humility, because in that you're not always going to know the best way forward, but you're going to do your best. You're going to innovate, but then learn, right? So I think true learning, good learning requires humility as well, because you can't just assume you know everything, because no one does know everything. And so, the innovation part, I think, is something that we strive for. It's one of WorthWhile's core values, one of my own core values, because I want to make sure I'm always striving to find a better solution to better serve, both as an organization, but for me personally. And then humility is another core value that I've already mentioned, but that ties into both WorthWhile as an organization, but also me personally, because none of us are perfect, right? It's a really healthy place to be at. I wish people understood the power of humility. Like it sounds maybe like it's weak. It sounds like a passive thing, but it's a game changer, right? If it's one of those, I try to share it even with my kids. I said, one of the most beautiful features a person can have, it's not their face or their physique, it's their humility. And I said, you will not know why, but you'll be drawn to someone. And in time, as you get to know them, one of those attributes that may come out is their humility. And so for us, it's important as an organization, but as individuals, to recognize, like, we don't know anything, and we're ready to learn and willing to learn. And when we mess up, we're going to own it. We're going to recognize that that's part of being human, messing up. And that humility makes us more vulnerable, but accessible to other people as well, which is so needed in this world, right? We just want to divide. Well, I don't want to divide, but I know there's a lot that do want to divide, and that's so sad, right? And the reason these stances are taken, these lines are drawn, is lack of humility, right? I am right at all costs. Well, the reality is none of us really are all right, and I'm included in that. And so that just allows for so many things to take place: learning, relationship, healing.
I think in the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis, there's this one chapter where the main character is working on humbleness or humility, and the two devils are writing about the character who's working on his humility. And one of the biggest flaws in somebody who's pursuing humility is when they realize it, they can be like, wow, I'm being really humble right now. It's like, oh wow, I've achieved this place of humility, and then the pride comes back in about how humble one is being. So it's not a passive action at all. I think what I've learned just doing this podcast, your episode number 54, and having 54 conversations, learning the active skill of not assuming things, of saying, Dan has a whole bunch of experiences here. I'm thinking, like, I'm trying to think of what to say next. So stop that. Like, if I think of something to say next after you're done talking, I'm not allowed to say it. I have to think of something else to say. Or always, like, anytime you're saying something, assume that I don't know anything. Like assume nothing. So I think it's absolutely an active skill. Humility is.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, because the moment you feel the need to maybe be humble is the immediate urge to fight it, right? So it's the reflex is to be right. The reflex is to prove, that what I've said or what I'm doing is justifiable, and so humility is that it's an active choice to say, no, I'll give this one to you, and so it is, yeah, it's definitely. It's like any muscle, though. The more you practice it, the better you can get at it. In fact, I wrote a book, The 10 Most Humblest People and How I Chose the Other 9. Did you hear that one?
No, it's so cool.
I didn't write it. That was the joke, how I chose the other 9. No.
As in Jesus, or it's you?
No, it was a poor joke attempt at one. No, but yeah, it is something that it's definitely a choice. Yeah, it's not easy. Because you're like, man, I know I'm right, but sometimes it's not a matter of who's right or wrong. It's that relationship, right? The people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sitting there and, like, even identifying in my own stomach, somebody saying something political or whatever that I completely disagree with, and I can feel the churning inside. It's like, ooh, I disagree with this. I want to argue with this person because I know I'm right. Yeah. And then sit there and then wait a second. They're feeling the exact same way. I can look at them and I can see I can actually see people when their stomach is turning. I'm like, they're having a physical reaction to this political conversation we're having. And this is not gaining anything for anyone right now. How can I make this person feel at peace right now? Not people please. How can I inspire a sensation of peace in this person's heart? Maybe we just table this conversation, or maybe I say, you know what? I'll give that to you. I'm not going to fight that.
And that's where humility plays such a key role in having good conversation, right? Having good discourse is relying on that humility. And because we oftentimes will approach discourse or arguments or things that we have different views on with I have to win you over to believe what I believe. I have to prove I'm right. But in reality, where humility comes in, it changes that script a little bit. And it's like, I need to understand why you think what you think, and I want you to invite you to understand what I think, but understand it, not believe it, right? And that's the difference. So humility allows us to say, I just want to understand you, where pride says, you need to believe me. And so that's where so much divide is happening, because everyone's saying, you need to believe me because I am right, as opposed to where we can have so much better discourse, so much better dialogue that's healthy, that's restorative. When we say, hey, I just need to understand where I'm coming from. Don't believe it, that's fine. Just understand my perspective, and that'll help you. And that actually opens the door to relationship then. And that's the beauty, and just humility it covers so many areas where, if applied, would be smoothed, would be made better. And so that's why that's a core value for myself.
I think it sounds oxymoronic, but I absolutely believe there's a close linkage between humility and confidence. Because if you say something that I disagree with, and I have this urge to convince you to believe what I believe, it's because I'm not actually fully secure or confident in my own belief. I need other people to reinforce, to affirm that I'm right, because I feel a fear of doubt that I could be wrong. That's the antithesis of confidence. I mean, that's a fear, that a needing for for Dan to agree with my belief so that I can feel better about what I believe. So you said at the beginning of this tangent that you tell your kids humility is something that draws people to you. It's because of that confidence. It's that you can say something that I disagree with, and I'm okay with that. I don't need you to believe what I do. And that's a very attractive quality. And people gravitate to those who are confident in their own core values and beliefs. There's a question I'd really like to ask you, actually. From your experience, how much of the long-lasting suffering from trauma is habit?
Well, trauma kind of initiates responses from the body and from individuals that have experienced trauma. They will experience involuntary things. The body is affected by trauma. The mind is also affected by trauma. And so when we are dealing with trauma, which is essentially pain, right, hurt, that's, in often cases been forced upon us, we're then left with this nagging internal demon that is constantly tearing you down, right? And that, I call it the voice of trauma. And we created even a short film called The Voice of Trauma that just helps people that maybe don't deal with trauma or haven't dealt with people that have had trauma to understand how that can present itself internally as this entity that is seeking to rip you down, right? Tear you down. And so the question you asked is like habit. Well, there's habits that come from almost out of a need to quiet that voice, right? And so we generate these solutions as best we can to quiet it. And some of those habits are through substance, right? Drinking, drugs, things like that. And it's done because it can help in the sense that it's helping you forget it and not hear it for a moment. But guess what? The voice is still there, right? And so when we talk about addiction and bad habits, right, these maladaptive behaviors that we've put in place to try and help ourselves numb the pain, numb the voice, quiet it, we never get rid of it, right? So addiction is not the addiction to the substance. Addiction is in response to a deeper issue. Very often we're looking at individuals that are fighting substance abuse and we're saying, just stop taking the bottle, just stop using that drug, which they should, and we should encourage them to do that, to stop. But the bigger issue is that voice inside, because whether they realize it or not, what they're trying to do is quiet it. And so what we often see is individuals with these bad habits, right? And so our objective is to help them understand that to first heal from that, the first thing you need to do is understand that trauma has happened, identify the trauma, and then begin to work on it. And so what that means is teaching them skills, going through counseling to really draw that out, that injury, that hurt, and then begin to heal from it. And so what happens in time, it's never a quick fix, but in time is that voice of trauma gets quieter and quieter. But don't be mistaken, it never goes away. Sadly, it's there. But through the healing process, you can learn to live with it and to ignore it and say, not today, right? And continue on this path, because you know what's better as you start to clear up from that hurt, as you address that trauma. You start to see what's better as a path forward, and you're able to not respond to that voice as much. And so I give you a long answer to the question of habits and bad habits and the perpetuation of it, but it all stems to a deeper thing. So I think a lot of times it's easier for us to talk about and identify the things we can see and name. It's harder to understand of why they're happening on a continual basis. And so that's where my response to that went there, is understanding that there's a deeper rooted factor that needs to be addressed in order to heal, in order to break from bad habits.
Is there a linkage between cutting through the bad habits and addressing the trauma and helping quiet that voice and taking action, doing what one knows is right, what they can, and doing it consistently?
Yeah. I think the reality is, when we serve individuals in our programs, we have this saying, like, you have to want it more than us, right? And I think a lot of people that have either struggled with their own addiction or helped others through it, struggle through pain, is you have to want it, right? And sometimes you'll have individuals that come to you and they're not ready. They don't want to let go of the past, right? They don't want to let go of the things that they knew. As bad as they may be, as hurtful as they may be, it's something they knew, it's familiarity, and it's hard to leave it behind. And so what I share, with my kids, but with those I work with, is this idea of, in any situation you're in, you're going to be faced with a lot of situations in life, some good, some bad, some indifferent, but you have an opportunity each time to choose how you respond. And so I often say, I know you and I have a great boss, right? We all work for the same person who happens to love us and also is okay if we call him dad, right? And the mindset is that in every one of these situations we're faced with, if we do what we know is right, if we do it to the very best of our abilities and we do it consistently, then we've fulfilled our role, right? And so I know it's easy to say, it's harder to do, but it's one of those things that I encourage people to try and live that out, because you will find yourself in a far better place if in every situation you do what you know is right to the best of your ability and do it consistently. And again, it takes practice. A lot of times messing up and failing, but it's something that you reap the benefits from, because we have a good boss, right? And like any good employer or any good parent, when you know your child is navigating a finite world with limited visibility on what's ahead, but they're doing their best, you're gonna honor that. And so that's the mindset I have. And so in this journey, there's moments when I've sold both of our homes, our home in Florida, our home in Pennsylvania. I'm sitting at a dining room table at a house that we were borrowing from a church, and I was looking at my computer screen. I actually screenshotted it because on the screen was our bank account, and it was showing zero. And I remember sitting there, and I didn't do what I knew was right in that moment. I basically was cursing God. I said, "How dare you? Like, you promise in Matthew, like, you'll take care of us. And you've left me with nothing," right? I'm a father. I'm a husband with responsibility. I've given up everything to follow you, and I have nothing to show for it. And so in that moment, I didn't do what was right and how I felt. But I think up until that point, I'd been doing pretty good. And I think in those moments, sometimes God gives us a little nudge and reminder that, no, I do care about you. Because I went outside then, I went to get the mail just to kind of clear my mind and forget about that giant zero that was so small on screen, but so encompassing, so large and all-consuming in the reality of my life and what that meant. But I went out, got the mail, came back in, sat down, and started going through it, and it was just junk mail, some bills, of course, which didn't feel great. But then there was a letter that was addressed to me, And I open it, and then there's a check with my name on it for $10,000. Right? And so my grandmother had passed away months ago, but unbeknownst to me, I was part of her will. And I didn't know that I was to receive anything. And it's not lost on me in those moments where God takes us to the very edge, to the limits of our ability to have faith and trust, and sometimes pushes us a little further and then says, I still got you. Right? And so, yeah, faith is such an important thing, and it's something that I've seen grow so much. And faith really, to do what is right every time, consistently, requires faith too, because it's hard. It's been really hard. And there's times too when you feel like I'm doing it just right and I'm trusting God, and that check doesn't show up and that healing doesn't happen. And that child that you love dies. And that's in those moments, though, when faith is that much more important. Because if you can still have faith and walk and trust that God will provide in a way that wasn't suited to your desires, but will answer in a way that is suiting of His, not only is our relationship grown stronger with Him, not only are we now someone tied closer to our Father because of our faith in Him to trust that He knows what He's doing, but in this world that's so full of hurt and chaos, if they see you walking through that pain, still having faith, they'll say, I want what He's got. Right? So our reason for faith is not only that it's important in our relationship with God and growing that, but it brings others. It's a testament to others that there's something more, because they'll see a hurting person still believe. And I think that's what our world needs more of.
Everyone who goes through a deeply traumatic or painful experience, when it's all said and done, there's almost always this moment of like, oh my gosh, I learned so much. And I think so much of human suffering, comes from a desire to control our world, control our finances, control our children's safety, control where we're going to live. And suffering comes when that control is ripped away and we lose that. But it can also be a huge blessing. It's a huge reminder. And where your faith comes in is like, no, you're not in control. You are not in control, Chris or Dan, and you need to give that up. And I love what you say about playing the role. Like I fulfilled my role. I think that's something our culture has lost. It's like, oh, who am I? Like, what do I identify as? Like, what is my thing? Like, what am I? We've lost like what is the role you play in this relationship with you and your child, with you and your parent, with the person you're serving, with the person who's serving you, and with your God. What is the role? It's not one relationship fits all. I think all relationships improve when you start approaching things in terms of like, what is the role, and you start responding, and you stop reacting.
Yeah, and I think that role, I think we all have the same role, and that we're created with a perfect purpose, right? And that is the prioritizing of people. Right? Our purpose is to point people to the truth, right? To the healing truth. And that's hard sometimes because we live in this day-to-day world, this world that's full of the tangibles that affect how we feel and how we navigate it. And you mentioned the Screw Tape Letters before, written by C.S. Lewis. There's a quote that's attributed to him that's helped me navigate and think in the proper way and have that perspective. And the quote goes like this: you don't have a soul. You are a soul, and you have a body, right? And I think that little change of thought of like, wait, first I'm a soul that secondly has a body. But we live the other way around. We forget that we are an eternal being. And so when we're faced with these challenges, even the hardest, the most heartbreaking moments, but realizing that this is just the temporary, There's something far greater to come, right? That's what we can lean on to navigate those hard moments. And that's why faith, in those moments is shining all the brighter, right? And faith is one of those things that requires that you have nothing left to go to. What I don't know, for better or lack of better example, if I were to say, Chris, I want you to drink this water, you'd say, sure, because you saw me hand it. Maybe not, because I've already drank from it. But if I said, Chris, I'm going to challenge you, would you be willing to put everything you own and love and even people on the line to say that, yes, this is water in here? You'd probably say, I'm not willing to make that wager, right? And then you are given the opportunity to take a sip of it, and you don't know if it's truly water, even though it looks like it, it seems like it. And the reality is, at the very end, you have to make a decision, like, I'm either going to or not. We're not given all the information for a reason, because if we're given all the information, faith doesn't exist, right? And so as best as you feel pretty confident that this is really water, but you still don't have all the information. And that's kind of what it's like in our day-to-day walk with God. We have a lot of the information. We don't have enough to know 100%. And it's in those moments, though, when you are left with nothing but to trust him, that he provides, right? I think a great example, I don't know if you ever went to Disney World or any big amusement park, yeah? For me, I think, I have 2 kids, and when they were younger, we did get to go to Disney World. What we would say is, like, hey guys, we're going to go to Disney World. We're promising you this wonderful thing. I want you to come, we're going to go. What I didn't do is then hand them the tickets and say, we're leaving in 3 months. Don't lose these, right? What instead happened is I promised them this wonderful thing, and I retained the tickets. And then we drove to Florida. Then we got in line in front of Disney World, and they still couldn't get in because I had the tickets. We walked up to the line where you were about to enter. They still couldn't get in because I had the tickets. We walked up to the turnstile, and they still couldn't get in because I had the tickets. And that's when then I reached out and handed the ticket to them, and they utilized it and got into this beautiful thing that was promised to them. And that's how we are called to live, is continue to step in faith, knowing that the ticket that is needed is held by our Father who cares and who has promised us wonderful things. And we don't know every step. We don't know every part of the script that he has for our story. But if we know he has a good thing planned, let's just trust him. And that good thing planned may look ugly to some and painful to others, and it will be, but we don't know how it's to be used. Right? But we need to trust, and that's where faith is again, is knowing that he ultimately knows how to offer that beautiful thing to all of us, but it requires our faith.
It's beautiful. Dan, what's next for you, and what's next for WorthWhile?
Well, WorthWhile, our goal is always just to reach and serve more. So one of the things I love is that we open the door to the communities and say you can be part of the solution. We have broaden our reach to serve, beyond just women to now men as well as youth, and reaching into schools and serving there. Our stores are providing resources for the community to learn about this issue. It's providing employment to survivors in our care. It's providing funding to our programs, so we are able to continually grow and expand. And so when donors give, their money goes right to the programs. That's great. It's not paying, admin costs. And so our new chapter is for WorthWhile is to continue to grow those services, but also help other organizations like-minded and supporting them in their role. And so that Worth It program I mentioned, how that connects in the community, we offer that for free to other organizations so they can connect to survivors in their community, whichever state they're in, wherever they're at. As well as the WorthWhile thrift stores, we offer that as a support to other organizations to help fund them and also provide a place of employment for their women and their individuals in their care. So that's a new route that we're going down and starting. And so that's where we're going as an organization. For me personally, is to continue just to be available to however God wants to use me. I'm finishing writing a book right now called Wait Till the End. And the idea behind that book, again, is to help individuals, much like what we talked about today, is to understand those truths, those values, those things that are important to us, that should be important to us, I should say. Those things that will help us in our journey, right? But more importantly, the reason it's called Wait Till the End is, right, when we all are, guilty, or most of us are guilty of doom scrolling on our phones through social media. And so many of those are just full of these stupid little, quips as wait till the end because you're going to get the payoff, right? And usually it's just some stupid, fast weight loss, supplement you got to take. And oh my goodness, I shouldn't have watched that whole thing. But the reality is, though, this isn't that. It's not a promise of wait till the end because you're going to get bait and switched. The idea is so often I'm working with individuals who are truly hurting for very valid reasons, and individuals I've worked with that have lost their lives to that battle. And the book is an encouragement to the same people I serve on a day-to-day basis. This idea that your story isn't done yet, right? Your story isn't finished, and like every good story, there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. But I want to encourage you to wait to the end. And along the way, find the author, right? Because he is a great author who, if we allow him to take the pen and finish our story and we wait to the end, it can become a beautiful story. Right? So that's something that I'm excited to share, and the hope is to help individuals that are hurting, that maybe we've taken turns that we weren't expecting in our life, and we've weathered some storms, to be an encouragement through this writing. So that's something that I'm currently working on and hoping that I can help more people.
Where can we find you?
Find me, right on your number, podcast 54. We can find me there. I encourage people to visit our website, WorthWhile.org. A little of my story is shared there, but it's more the people, the teams. This work is accomplished because of all the amazing people. It's not anything to do with me. I'm just another person on the team. And, so I encourage people, if you want to get involved, like I shared, there's many ways for the community to get involved. Join us. Go to worthwhile.org, learn more. Shoot us an email if you want to connect that way. It's a good place to start. I'm not tons on social media. I don't post a whole lot. But yeah, I think that'd be a good place to keep in touch. And hopefully there's some takeaways people can have from this podcast today.
Dan, thank you so much for coming.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.